if you're going to tell Black Widow's
Yeah.
story, this is the perfect opportunity to show how, they have these super confident female assassins who go out and destroy governments and corrupt dynasties and all sorts of things that they can do around the globe. And in this case, I think it falls far short of what it could be just because it focuses so much on how competent Natasha is that she simply doesn't have any flaws or any reason to struggle because she has this planned out the entire time. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I am your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us one of our favorite co-hosts, Andrew, to review a earlier film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's right, we are reviewing Black Widow, the 2021 American superhero film with a story by Jacques Schaeffer, and Ned Benson, with a screenplay by Eric Pearson and directed by Kate Shortland. So, getting right into the review, Andrew, what were your initial thoughts having watched this film and your rating for Black Widow?
Initially, I was watching this and I just kept asking myself, why is this so bad? Came to the conclusion there's a lot of missed opportunities and lost potential for a character that has some good material to work with, but it ended up getting a 2.9. So,
Okay. Yeah, definitely in the lower rankings in the Marvel Cinematic
yeah.
Universe. I did not give it the worst, but I definitely gave it a bad rating as well. I got a 3.4. And the reason I got a 3.4 was
Okay.
had to do a lot with some of the similar ideas that you mentioned, but more significantly, I was focused on the characters. And what really struck me about this film that it has issues with is some of the same issues we had with Captain America: Brave New World, in that I think some of the better characters in this film are not the main character. And it's unfortunate with how they used it and how they developed it, and they did not capitalize on the characters that were the character that's the main character, you want them to be the most compelling or the most at stake there, right? And they just didn't do that this time. They had other characters that were more highly valued, and then other characters that were just crap. And of course, if you've seen the movie, you know it devolves a lot near the end. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, if you're interested in that, stay tuned. But for those who are unfamiliar with Black Widow, Andrew, can you give them a summary of what Black Widow is about?
Black Widow is a movie about Black Widow. It takes place after Captain America Civil War and right before the end credit scene for Captain America Civil War, which is when Cap breaks out. Those that helped him during the film break out of the raft. The film focuses around Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff's character, as she re what's the word I'm looking for? Reunites with her long lost family members. Really, they were just grouped together for a Soviet mission. Her younger sister, that of Yelena Belova, her father, Alexei Shostakov, the Red Guardian, and I honestly forgot her mom's name. But then again,
Melina.
the MCU forgot their mom too, so I don't know that she really matters. The movie focuses around the Red Room, finding out that actually Natasha didn't kill them, but to be completely honest, we didn't know she killed them to begin with, so not really much there for the audience. The movie focuses on Yelena and Natasha's relationship, as well as their relationship with their parents as they take down the Red Room.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what you get in this film. Um, there's even a sense in which this film really yeah, we'll get into it. I'm not no time for analysis here. Now's the time for that's the summary. We're gonna get to the opening scene as we always do with the film. So starting it right off the bat, right? You have this backstory of the whole family living in Ohio, completing a secret mission, and then escaping to Cuba. After that, you see that the two girls are taken away to be trained in this secret organization known as the Red Room. What was your initial thoughts, impressions of that opening scene?
It was interesting, right? It's a little different than the Marvel movies we've seen. I mean, it still has a fight scene, if you will, but it's not the same in the sense that these are characters we know and we're being re-caught up.
Hmm.
It's establishing kind of who Alexei was, who Melina was, and introducing us to the characters of Yelena and Natasha when they're much younger.
Hmm.
I didn't find it particularly interesting, if that makes sense. It was just like, okay, cool. We'll see where this goes.
Yeah, I mean, like eh, they do okay, right, with it, and it's very unique. So I was surprised that I wasn't engaged with it as much as maybe other films. But I think those other films have something going for them in that most of them are characters that we already know, right? And so in these other films, you have these reestablishing of the value of them and what they do and who they are and what their powers are and all that stuff. And so that lends some credibility, if you will, to that opening scene that you don't necessarily get in this one because a lot of these characters are brand new, right? You don't know that Natasha and her blue hair is the same Natasha at first that we've been seeing in these other films, and then it gets revealed, but it doesn't feel like the same character, and so it feels like a new film. It's interesting, it's engaging, it's enough that I'm like, all right, I'd like to see more, but I didn't particularly find it one of my favorite openers. That being said, I can see how a lot of people are engaged by this opening, so I didn't take a lot of credit away from it personally. I think it's not a weak part of the film compared to most other aspects of the film. So that's what you get. Nothing really surprising there. I think in regards to opening scenes, Marvel does okay, even with some of those fight openers. Enough that you're engaged. So, not a huge issue. The bigger issues come into play when you deal with the characters themselves. So let's start off with that main one, right? We have Natasha Romanoff as the protagonist of this film. What were your thoughts on her as this protagonist? Is she engaging? Is she compelling? Does she have flaws? What are your thoughts on her?
Massive letdown. Um, I mean, you voiced something earlier that I have written down, and that's that Yelena is the main character here. She's much more compelling
Hmm.
than Natasha, in my opinion. I don't know if you were thinking of Yelena, but that's who I'm thinking of in terms of being a more compelling character. And I think it's just because Natasha in this movie is so, I don't know if even stock is the right word. It's she is better as a supporting role,
Hmm.
honestly, because she doesn't have development. She doesn't have like these internal struggles. And we're told she has these internal struggles, but she doesn't actually act them out in such a way that we feel like, oh, she's actually struggling with something. It's just, oh, I struggle with the red room hurt me when I was a child.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, cry me a river because clearly you don't care.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is we have so much material, or Marvel does, to actually make Black Widow a much more compelling character.
Hmm.
And after watching this movie and actually thinking about it, because I think I watched portions of it, if not the whole thing, when it first came out, I didn't really give it the time of day to actually think it over. I just watched it and went, yeah, that was not enjoyable. After watching it, though, I started thinking about why is Black Widow a character that's so basic?
Hmm.
And we'll get into this more as we cover more of the Avengers films.
Sure.
I think one of the reasons Black Widow is such a failure as a character is that she ends up being a plot device far too often, to the point where she isn't actually her own character. And she doesn't become her own character until like the end of Civil War and then Infinity War.
Hmm.
And then Endgame she dies off. But the Black Widow we have in Iron Man 2 is completely different than the Black Widow we have in Captain America Winter Soldier, and different than the Black Widow we have in the Avengers movie.
Hmm.
And so we're making this movie after just getting a kind of idea of who Black Widow is, if that really. It's just she's more consistent in those movies, and then we don't get any character development.
Hmm.
Whereas you have a character who, right, is similar to the Winter Soldier in that she's conditioned, she's programmed, she leaves this programming. She should have so many struggles internally
Hmm.
with who she is and what she did, but all we really get is like a few lines in Avengers where she says her ledger is dripping blood, and Age of Ultron where she's like, "Oh, boohoo, I can't have kids, and I'm a monster like Hulk."
Hmm.
But other than that, we don't really get the same type of development like we get with Winter Soldier, where there's actually an immense amount of struggle on his part dealing with all of the stuff, these atrocities he's committed.
Hmm.
And it should be even worse for her, arguably, because she was not being completely forced to do so. It was more of a conditioning for her.
Right. Yeah. I'd agree. The issues that I see with her as a character are going back to Yelena is a huge contrast, right? And it was interesting in two ways, right? So if you've been following the podcast at all, you know that we're reviewing this right on the tails of reviewing Thunderbolts, right? And there's a couple things that I noticed about this film, kind of early to get on to Yelena's case, but I think it provides a good contrast here, right? Yelena is the sister, or the not the biological sister, but the adoptive sister, if you will, of Natasha Romanoff, because she was part of this false family that they had in the middle of Ohio during this mission, right? And they grew up together in some ways during that time. Now, in this, you see that Yelena has this arc about family and about learning to deal and to accept her family despite the pain that they've caused. And this is some level of character development that isn't actually fully completed. And this is one of the things I thought was remarkable about contrasting this with Thunderbolts, is that Yelena, she has this struggle to accept family that she at first rejects, right? And that's part of her arc. But at the same time, now that she's accepted it, she has some hurt from her family continuing not to be there, even though supposedly they've reconciled in Thunderbolts. And so they take this character arc and they develop in this film, but then they continue to develop it into the next film, which is what you want to see when you see character development, right? At the same time, if you saw a review of Thunderbolts, Thunderbolts isn't amazing, but it's solid, and especially in regards to that aspect of the film, they do very well. So, Yelena's character is very compelling for those same reasons. Natasha supposedly goes through a similar arc. The issue is that in some ways it contrasts her as being further along than Yelena, right? Yelena's never had to deal with these things versus Natasha has in some ways dealt with them. Um, it just doesn't seem super genuine, I would say, with Natasha. The only time you really get any aspect that she's developed, and this is jumping way ahead of the film, but you see that she has this line at the end of the film where she goes, more or less, you're right. I do need to face my past and deal with it, and that's the solution, right? And she says that to the villain, and that's her arc, if you will, as a character. And you go, okay, so now she's gone through development, right, as a character in this film. See, we threw this line in there, and everything else in the film seems to be more like she's down to business. She has this goal. She's going to achieve this goal, and she doesn't necessarily have emotional stakes like they claim or like they suppose in this film. At least demonstrated in how she emotionally reacts to the situations at hand. So it just wasn't believable for her as a character, and it falls far short of what you would expect from her, since this film is all about her. Right. And so I thought that her character was severely lacking, especially in contrast to other characters in this film.
Black Widow has a lot of potential in that she has all of this stuff there. They just don't use it.
Hmm.
I don't know that there's much more to add to that, right? There's a lot that goes on with her character from the source material, right? In the source material, she's trained by Winter Soldier. There's a lot of emotional connection between those two characters. That's not necessarily needed in the MCU.
Hmm.
But I think that there's something to be said for the fact that they took this character that has a lot going for her, in my mind, and in the MCU, she just becomes this like basic assassin character who's supposedly like one of the best assassins in the world, and she just ends up being a plot device far too often. I mean, we talked about this in Civil War, right, where she is on Iron Man's side simply because they needed to have a 6v6.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think the movie does her a massive disservice. And honestly, this should have just been Yelena Belova, and then Thunderbolts would be Yelena Belova Part Two.
Basically. Yeah, and I could get behind that pretty well. The the main aspect of this film is this idea about the Red Room, right? And them going to take down the Red Room, which is where they were trained. And this character Dreykov, who was the head of the Red Room, has been manipulating things behind the scenes for so long. And she gets convinced between her and Yelena that this is a serious threat that needs to be dealt with. What were your thoughts as they introduced these villains of him and, spoiler alert, his daughter, who ends up being this character of can't even remember her name right now, but
We don't even care because she dies in Thunderbolts.
right away.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the villains?
I didn't enjoy the villains. And this is another portion of the movie, right, where they failed to do what even at the bare minimum what they needed to do as villains,
Hmm.
right? And you get this when you think about heightening tensions within the film. There were like no heightened tensions in this film. And I realized this about halfway through where it was like Black Widow is just succeeding at everything she tries to do. And then the one time where you try to have this, like, ooh, her mom turns on her, her mom just immediately undoes all of that. And then the plot twist in the film is actually Black Widow was never having any struggles at all and had this thought out the entire time. So we don't, as the audience, feel like any sort of like nervousness or anxiousness watching this
Hmm.
as we're wondering, is Black Widow going to come out on top? She doesn't lose anything in this film. She isn't afraid of losing anything in this film because she has no emotional connection to anyone, and there's nothing that she could possibly lose that she cares enough about to begin with. And they try to build that up a little bit with her family, but we don't get any of that. And I
Hmm.
think it'd be interesting if we saw like, oh, she had a friend that was in the Red Room, and that friend ended up dying. Maybe that adds some level of tension for her, but it doesn't. Maybe her mom should have died. Honestly, I think her mom should have died because we don't see her mom like ever again at all. Like
Right.
we both sat there like, where did her mom go? We get to see her dad again in Thunderbolts, but supposedly her mom and Yelena and Alexei are all going on this epic quest to save all of the Black Widows around the globe, and we get none of that ever again. It's just forgotten, and we it just gets swept under the rug and forgotten completely.
Yeah. It was, I mean, and especially for a film, that's supposed to be I guess, a girl empowerment, if you will, right? The female leads are taking full control. This is an opportunity to do that, right? If you're going to tell Black Widow's
Yeah,
story, this is the perfect opportunity to show how, they have these super competent female assassins who go out and destroy governments and corrupt dynasties and all sorts of things that they can do around the globe. And in this case, I think it falls far short of what it could be just because it focuses so much on how competent Natasha is that she simply doesn't have any flaws or any reason to struggle because she has this planned out the entire time, right? And you see that in her, and you see that in her mom, who's also super competent, right? The only person who's not so competent is Alexei, and that's partially because he's a bum, but he's super skilled, but he's also a bum, right? And he's got his own character arc, which we can talk about in a minute. But yeah, I think that this is clearly a problem in this film. I didn't say that there was no uh character like tension in this film because there's definitely at least some when you see them captured at first and you go, oh my goodness, they did get captured, or at the beginning when they're running away, like, okay, there is some tension there. But for the most part, yeah, you see them only winning all the time, and it's like, well, if you're the heroes of the story, you must struggle with something, and if you struggle with nothing, what are we watching? We're just watching someone progress through the story. There is some ways I've seen, right, and this is a bit of a side tangent, but there are ways where people can tell a story that you don't that they do win a lot, but a lot of that is promoted and progressed through mystery more than anything else as things are revealed. In this case, there's not much of a mystery except for at the very end where the plot twist is we were only winning more, right? And I
yeah,
think the mystery aspect is seen a lot more in mystery movies, right? Murder mysteries, the like, where you are trying to figure out who did it, right? Those are a lot more along the lines of when something can continue to have heightened tension, but not necessarily a ton of sacrifice, right? It's all about usually some sort of time crunch or something about figuring out what happened before the villain gets away with what they did, or any number of other things, right? So same thing with heist movies, right? You're not necessarily concerned about, well, actually that one's the reverse. Never mind. Let's don't talk about that. Anyways, point is, there are ways you can develop the tensions, and the fact is they just didn't use anything in the arsenal to make it continually gripping at your heart, wondering what's going to happen next. You just don't, because there's always progression in a positive direction for the protagonists in this film. Same. And the villains in this case, of course, are disappointing. I think Dreykov is one of the most mid villains I've seen in a while. He is the just super bad, batty guy who will do whatever he wants and feels like he has the capacity to do so, insofar as even brainwashing his own daughter, as it turns out in this film. And he has no qualms with doing that just because he has a raw desire for power. He was not nuanced in any way. His daughter wasn't nuanced in any way because she was brainwashed until the last, 10 seconds you see her. And then the film just progresses from there, or it does not progress from there, right? It just goes. So that's what you get with the villains. That's what you get with Natasha, and it goes all the way from when they pick up their father Alexei from prison to when they go to the Red Room and crash the thing and destroy the villains, right, and their hideout. So much for that. I mean, we kind of jumped around, but progression wise, they start off as a family going through this terrible or tight situation of trying to get away from Shield as they deliver this information to Russia, right? That has some tension. Then she meets with her sister. Then they get her dad to escape. Then they meet with the mom. Then they go to the Red Room. And at the Red Room, they go and confront Dreykov. And then the thing crashes. They kill the villains. They free the women. And show's basically over. Almost none of that has heightened tension in it. No, nothing in it is really compelling. And so all that you get is the tension with the side characters that really drives the story forward in any compelling way, as we talked about with Yelena. So what do you do with that? There's nothing you can do with that except say this is not worth watching again. Yeah. So I not much more to say on the story itself unless you have anything else really to add, except for that it's garbage and it needed help and they just didn't do that.
Uh, After watching this movie, something dawned on me about Disney in general and making movies about female empowerment.
Hmm.
Disney tries to overcompensate by giving us female leads with no flaws, and that is their version of female empowerment. I think you see this in Captain Marvel, you see this in Black Widow, you see this in Rey in the third Star Wars trilogy,
Hmm.
you see this in She-Hulk too, even though I wish I never saw that, for a plethora of reasons aside from this.
Hmm.
And as I thought about it, right, anytime I think about a well-written female character, my mind always goes back to Ahsoka. As a wonderful Star Wars nerd that I am, the reason her character is so compelling, though, is because of her flaws and the arcs that she goes through. The fact that she actually struggles with things that are human. And of course, there are like, oh, that's such an awesome scene where she pulls out her lightsabers and is just decimating her enemies. But you can still get that with a good character and still give them flaws. I mean, you even have the female characters in the Lord of the Rings, right? So much better than
Hmm.
what we get with
Yes,
Marvel characters.
100%.
And I think Disney needs to rethink the way that they've been writing female characters, at least within their own movies,
Hmm.
because we end up getting just these stock female characters who are just absolute girl bosses who struggle with nothing. And to some people, that may be cool. It just doesn't make a good story or a compelling character, though.
Yeah, and I think the Lord of the Rings example is perfect, especially with Eowyn in mind, right? Because she's a character that is has some real struggle, some real fear behind her, at the same time pushes through that and strives for what she wants in the midst of everything going on. So, there is another example of a strong female protagonist. I guess she's a side character in this case, but still a strong female character that is used effectively in the films that that shows that you can utilize females. It's this is not like it doesn't have to be a male dominated storyline, right? There's no reason that you can't make a compelling story here. They just focus on the wrong things.
All right. Well, we can move on to the side characters. We've talked a little bit about Yelena. Um, I don't really have much more to say about her because even though she is developed some in this movie, I
Hmm.
don't think it's super well done. It's more of a, oh, she has emotional connection to her family. I mean, I think she's better than Natasha, right?
Hmm.
She has at least some emotional connection, and you can use that connection she has to increase the stakes for Yelena,
Hmm.
to make this movie more impactful for her. Unfortunately, she's a side character in this film. And you have that little bit that she does throughout the movie where she's calling Natasha a poser, and then she like does the pose in the hallway, and she's like, "Oh, that's gross." But other than that, I don't have anything to add on Yelena unless you do.
No, I mean, like, just examples of when you see that is, for example, when they're sitting at the dinner table and Alexi's recounting the times when they were a family, and then Tasha's like, "That's not real," and Yelena says, "Don't say that. It was real to me." And she genuinely cared about that time in her life, and she's trying to reconcile that and say, "I have this time that was a good time in my life," and to say that it was all fake and all for nothing is to destroy my childhood and say that it was basically non-existent in any meaningful way. And I
Well,
think
it's also to. Oh, good.
no, I just think that it's shows that her value and her trying to reconcile who she was as a child with who she is today, and find the good in that, and to accept what happened, and see it in a positive light, because otherwise she wallows in despair, right? And feels like her entire life has been stolen from her by the Red Room and by everyone who's involved in it. But go ahead, you were about to say something.
Yeah, but it's also just like to take that away from her would be to take away the one good memory she has and
Hmm.
to make her entire life just this dark pit of despair in her eyes.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think Yelena's character is at least better than Natasha's. Unfortunately, she didn't have as much screen time, so doesn't make the movie all that much better.
sure. And they do better with it in Thunderbolts for sure than in this film. But like I said before, they started it in this film and continue to develop it, which is what we want to see. The other side character that I think has some merit is Alexei, the Red Guardian. And it's part of his personality is this guy who wants to relive the glory days, and he has this aspiration to reconnect with a part of him that's from the past, right? And the question is, why is he living in the past and trying to keep a family together that was fake? He still sees it as real in his own eyes, right? All these different aspects that are him just fully embracing it. And they all say, this is crap. This isn't real. Why are you trying to pretend that we were a family when we're not, right? And him trying to say, no, like this is real and we need to embrace that fully because this is what we have. Um, I think he's interesting. He doesn't necessarily have a ton of development, but he definitely provides a contrast and value to the family as he tries to, in some ways, make up for being a bad dad, right? Which he doesn't really do that well, but he tries. Um, and that's what you get with him.
I think in my mind, I think Alexei actually has a decent amount of development as well as Yelena. And his development to me is this idea that he is so focused on pursuing Mother Russia and being this Russian Captain America and telling this story of how he's fought Captain America in the past and how they're equals. And he feels this need to prove himself still.
Mhm.
Um, and he wants these girls to succeed, even though they aren't his biological daughters. In his mind, he was still their dad for a time being. And he tells them, I'm so proud of you. Well, look what you've become and made of yourselves.
Mhm.
And realizing that isn't what happened to them is not what a dad should want for his kids. And you even have this in his conversation with Yelena, where he's like talking to her, and she tells him to shut up, and she calls him the Crimson Dynamo, and he just goes, "It's the Red Guardian." It's like he still really wants this, but also having to realize like he had a massive effect on these two girls
Hmm.
in such a negative way, and now he wants to fix that. Um,
Hmm.
by the end of the movie, he kind of comes to this terms with wanting to re-enter their lives in a more father like role. So, right, it's not super prominent in the film, but I think it serves his character, and especially as a side character, it gives him enough depth. Now, I don't know that you can say the same for the mom.
No. And Melina is very much, you see her as more cold, calculated, competent. She more closely aligns with Natasha in this film, ironically, in that even though she's somewhat of a villain at first, as you realize how much she's really worked for Dreykov and continues to work for Dreykov, she's this character that aspires to continue to work for this organization and then sees the evil it's done and decides to work with the people that were her fake family for the sake of achieving a positive goal and outcome for the world. So, it's a good goal, but once again, it's just her achieving specific goals in life and not necessarily having an emotional connection to everything that's going on. Um, didn't find her compelling, didn't think she was a good ad. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about her, except she's disappointing and she likes pigs.
I will also say, as a quick side note, Endgame presents us with the loss of several characters,
Hmm.
right? We lose Captain America at the end. We lose Iron Man, which is
Hmm.
arguably one of the most impactful deaths of the MCU up until that point, until now we have Doomsday where he's back. But that aside, at the time when he dies, it's a huge blow to the universe as well as to the fans.
Hmm.
Black Widow's death was so unimpactful, I think, because her character lacks the emotional depth and development that Iron Man had. Right? And the scene is shot in such a way that it's almost like we as the audience are being told we should feel really bad for Black Widow right now. You, one, don't have the same response from the rest of the characters upon her death. Like, Iron Man dies, the entirety of that battlefield of heroes is kneeling for him.
Hmm.
He is a fallen hero.
Hmm.
You have so many different emotional reactions too from people close to him, like Pepper, like Rhodey, like Spider-Man, Peter Parker, even Captain America. There's a level of respect there. When Black Widow dies, you have Hawkeye cry, you have Hulk throw a chair, and then they move on with their lives, and that's it.
Hmm.
She is both forgotten by audiences and the characters within. She needs more character development, and having this movie come afterwards, one, is a massive missed opportunity, which I think also adds to that, right? It
Hmm.
comes after her death, and it's like we've already moved on from this character at this point. So her movie needed to come before Infinity War and Endgame. And two, her movie needed to add to her character. Unfortunately, we get nothing added to her character other than we get to see some fight scenes with her, and we get to see her wear what, two or three different uniforms? Like, it doesn't add to the character of Natasha Romanoff or the hero of Black Widow at all. She's nothing more than just an extra body in the Avengers by the end of her time
Man,
in the MCU.
yeah. And the only reason why I would think they played out the Marvel releases in the way that they did is because not so much because they wanted a last hurrah for Natasha. And you see that in her development, right? They assume she already exists and they assume that everyone already cares for her and that they know that she should be valued and whatnot. Instead, what you get is a lot more focus on Yelena in this film and her character development, specifically because you see that they're trying to build her up as this next assassin figure in the MCU. So it's it's very much intentional, I think, in that way, is that they were leading toward having someone else fill this role while they continued the cinematic universe. And that is why I think Natasha falls short in this film. The um yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. Did you think that the themes that she and Yelena and all these characters portrayed in this film were present? Were they compelling? Did they have interesting values that they played with in this film?
No, I think it's kind of an attempt at like this idea of family in my mind.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think it's played out very well because the family is kind of brushed under the rug as being just this ploy. And to Black Widow, it's not really her family until the very, very end. And the message we get is my family's the Avengers and I'm going to go save them now.
Hmm.
So the family that were built up isn't really a family. The only two people in this movie who truly see themselves as family is Red Guardian and Yelena.
Yeah,
And you get that more in Thunderbolts.
right. Yeah,
Melena still doesn't see them as family. She, in her mind, Red Guardian is, to be quite blunt, an object for sexual pleasure, and you get this in a few lines of dialogue there. But she doesn't see him as husband material.
right.
She doesn't see her daughters as her daughters, really. She kind of says that, but it's never really acted out. And Natasha is just like, oh, I care about you guys, but not in a familial type of way.
Hmm. Right. And you see that because Melina doesn't, when she does fight for her family in this film, it looks like she's just carrying out another mission. It doesn't look like she's
Yeah.
someone who's trying to do something because she has a noble cause she's fighting for. So it falls short. But yeah, the themes are there, right? Facing your fears, family, all that kind of stuff. There is some level of that, but it's not nearly strong in any way. So it's very mild. And that's pretty much what you get in the film. Do you think this film has a lasting impact? Would you change your rating? What are your general thoughts?
I think there's two things to say in terms of this film's legacy slash impact. One, I think Marvel even realized what a flop this was in killing off Taskmaster in Thunderbolts,
Hmm.
right? I mean, Taskmaster in this film is abysmal. We didn't spend much time talking about her, which is crazy that it's a her. And it's just like, why? I mean, here's the thing. I could see them making them Taskmaster a woman and making it work.
Sure.
But the fact that they just put a woman in the Taskmaster suit and that was supposed to be a big reveal, that's another one of the plot twists, if you will, but it doesn't do very well. It doesn't land right. And Taskmaster is meant to be one of these ominous, massive threats in terms of the Marvel universe, especially in the comics. He's a threat to Captain America, to Black Widow, to pretty much anyone who doesn't have superpowers, and even those who do.
Hmm.
Um, and he would have been a great villain to have for a Black Widow movie, right? This is someone who copies her every move, and her entire superpower, if you will, is her fighting styles, which he can mimic in every single way. But after that one scene on the bridge, Taskmaster is just not a threat
Hmm.
at all.
Yeah.
And so that, all that to say, Marvel even realizes this is a massive flop and gets rid of this version of Taskmaster. I'm assuming they're going to bring a better version in later that's more comic accurate, especially with the way they've been leaning with all of these very comic accurate costumes and leaning very heavily with Fantastic Four specifically. Secondarily, I think the impact this movie has is it's just another instance that we can add to the list of a poorly written female lead for the Marvel Universe.
Hmm.
And if Marvel can take notes, potentially we can get an actually compelling female protagonist in the future. Now, who that would be, I don't know. Um, but as it stands, this is just another drop in the bucket of girl bosses who aren't compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think she has a single line of dialogue in this film. And so all you see is her staring wide-eyed at people as she takes off her mask. In that case, well, I
Yeah.
take off the mask.
Well, in
Whoop-de-doo.
total, I think in the entirety of the MCU, she has one line of dialogue, and that's in Thunderbolts.
And it's like, hi.
It's like, I'm not here for you. That's it.
Yeah, she's here to get roasted alive. That's what she got there for. According to the MCU,
Yeah.
anyways. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think this film's going to have a lasting impact. It's the only thing it does is introduces us to Yelena and Alexei, who show up in the Thunderbolts. And if they continue a positive directory or direction, excuse me, with those characters, we could see good things with them to come. And this is just a bad start to what could be an otherwise great characters. Everything else in this film is likely going to be forgotten, right? They will remember Natasha Romanoff in the Avengers movies far more than they will in her actual film that was made for her. So it's not gonna it doesn't say much or well of this film and how it progresses. And I mean honestly, I don't expect the views to reflect that for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it as a casual movie watcher, right? Watching this, just trying to keep outside knowledge out, still a bad film. As someone who has read Marvel comics, and there are certain characters that I find very interesting and compelling, it's even more infuriating because this is a character who, even though she's not my favorite in the comics by far, I think she offers some very interesting dynamics, especially in interacting with certain characters like Captain America, Winter Soldier, Iron Man, that we just don't get in this film or pretty much any other film for that matter from her character. And so, I mean, to be quite frank, it feels like they just said, let's pick a hot woman to play Black Widow, over sexualize her, and then we'll kill her off because she doesn't have much depth to her.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah. That's what you get. Pers
Which I think, unironically, it's going against the very idea that they're trying to promote, which is female empowerment. But all they're doing is they're degrading her to purely being an attractive woman
yeah, they can fight
and
really
over
well.
sexualizing her.
Yeah. I mean, this conversation did highlight a few points that I probably did give a little extra value to. So I would likely um, reduce my rating to a 3.2 or even a 3.0, just based off of what we talked about. But it's not much further down than where it already is. It's already in the I'm not gonna watch this again unless I have to type area. So that's what you get. Um, I don't know if you have anything else to add as a parting thought for the audience, Andrew.
Disney, please give us better female characters. All right. Take notes from Lord of the Rings. Take notes from Clone Wars with Ahsoka. Right. There are examples.
Nice.
You have lots of resources at your disposal. Please don't mess up Scarlet Witch.
Oh my gosh. Yep, that's that, I guess, is the pod. We hope you all enjoyed because we will be back as we always are next week. We'll see you all then.